If you're looking to become a psychologist, then let this be your guide. With this podcast at your side, you'll be on your way to being qualified. It's the Aspiring Psychologist Podcast with Dr. Marianne and Trent.
Hi, welcome along to the Aspiring Psychologist Podcast. I am Dr. Marianne Trent, and I hope that you will find this really useful. Thank you for being part of my world. Today is a special request from Marianne, who got in contact, and she says, I'm thinking about what might be beneficial for aspiring psychologists could be power imbalances during our sessions and how to address these, and also maybe how we take into account social factors and inequalities when working with clients and families. So thank you so much for your request, Marianne. I will do my very best to answer that for you, because it is a great question. So thank you. So when I was applying for doctorate places myself, I had a tendency to reflect on fiduciary relationships, which might not be a relationship that you have heard of before, but a fiduciary relationship is one where someone else has, a duty of care for the other person. So one person is coming along because they need something, or maybe not always because they need something. They might not think that they need anything, but one of you has a duty of care or some kind of responsibility for the other person. So we would get fiduciary relationships if we were a psychologist and we had a client. We'd get them if you were a GP. You get them if you were a dentist, or an occupational therapist, speech and language therapist. All of these professions would be, whether they knew it or not, because it's not a very common term, would be subject to fiduciary relationships. And there are obviously, there's caveats to that can make relationships a bit more complicated. So along the lines of the boundary setting episode, which I believe from the top of my head is episode 8, there are limits to our relationship. And of course, our relationships should be friendly with our service users. They should be, personable, I believe. Although I have, previously worked in a service where an R is dynamic, and so that is a slightly different type of relationship, but you're still polite, you're not rude to people. It's worth thinking about those power imbalances. I know that many clients that I've worked with have wanted to call me Dr. Trent, and I say to them, you don't have to call me Dr. Trent, you can just call me Marianne. But for them, perhaps culturally, or because it's just the way they've been brought up, they want to continue to call me Dr. Trent, and I respect that about them. I'm not going to correct them every time. I will explain that with them, once. But many of them do still want to call me Dr. Trent, and clients that I might have been working with, for over a year still message me in emails formally as Dr. Trent, but obviously to my face might call me Marianne. But we're not correcting or dismissing what a client brings to them, but we do have to be very careful with how we are handling our power and our responsibility. And just to go over some of the boundaries stuff again, we have to make sure that we are being clear about the caveats to our role. We need to make sure that people have insight and can make an informed consent knowing what what therapy and dealing with us as a service entails for them. So you can't ever really talk too long about consent and about the limits of confidentiality. And sometimes it can be useful to say this applies for all of our sessions together, but sometimes people start the beginning of every session by saying, a little something about confidentiality again. But we do need to be mindful of the impact that we have over others, and my clients seem to have a great deal of impact over what I watch on Netflix, because they will often tell me what they're watching, and then I think, I feel like I don't want to miss out on the party. I feel like I need to get involved with that. And I might have had a similar impact on you when I spoke about This Is Us. Maybe recently you listened to that and you're like, well, I've never watched This Is Us, but she says that's all right. Because you become a bit of an influencer, don't you, when you're chatting about things. We can have shared experiences with our clients, but we also have to know that there are differences, and this is really useful fodder for supervision as well. And whilst you might have shared characteristics with your client, we have to be careful that we're not over-identifying or diminishing our clients' experiences because we have some understanding of what they've been through. But sometimes our clients will purposefully seek us out, especially in private practice, because they believe that we will know and resonate with what they're talking about. Let's take a short break here, and I will be back with you on the other side of this break.
Hi, my name's Matt. I'm an assistant psychologist in a specialist autism team in Liverpool, and I've just gotten onto the doctorate in Exeter starting this September. The Aspiring Psychologist Podcast has been great for me. The content and the guests are brilliant, and I think Marianne does a really good job as a host of being really positive, normalising negative experiences, and reminding people to be compassionate towards themselves. For me, the podcast is especially useful because I feel like I'm always busy, and on the run up to interviews I could listen to it whilst I was at the gym, and it allowed me to feel as though I was still getting that important time for myself and do things that are important for me, whilst still engaging with stuff that is going to help me on my psychology journey without needing to carve out any separate and dedicated time for it. I definitely recommend that anyone wanting to know more about working in psychology give this podcast a listen, as it gives a really clear and honest insight into the things you can expect.
Okay, welcome back. So I was talking to a journalist yesterday about eating alone and cooking alone for ourselves, and how that can be an ultimate act of self-care. But I also asked her to make reference to the fact that for many people currently, it would feel like a bit of a decadent thing to do, to be perhaps switching an oven on just for ourselves, or using all the resources of using a gas hob and then having to wash up all of the stuff just for one person. And I think unless you've got some awareness of the social context of that, unless you've just taken that on board, then we need to make sure that some of the suggestions and some of the things we might be discussing with clients, for activity scheduling, for example, or for building structure and routine into life to make it more functional and enjoyable, we do need to make sure that we're not, socially unaware of what it is like for our service users to be trying to navigate the world at the moment, when they might well be, scared of, factors associated with the pandemic. They might, be struggling financially to heat homes or put food on the table. And so it is really useful to have conversations with people, even when it might look like they couldn't possibly be struggling for money, it's useful to check in with people about, some of the factors from the Maslow's hierarchy, just to check how things are for them financially, how things, you're not asking for bank statements here, but if someone is really struggling to pay their water bill, or, they're worried that they can't cover the cost of the next food shop, that really does impact on people in a big and important way. And I had a recent conversation with a client where it came to light that they weren't really sure how they were going to fill their cupboards next time. And so we used a bit of our time in the session to look at options for, emergency food provision. And that then freed the client up to feel validated, to feel seen, and it wasn't done in a way at all to be shaming, but to just feel like they had other options available to them. Because if you feel like you can't feed yourself or your children, then you don't know where your next meal is coming from. It's very difficult to think about anything else, because it can really dominate things. So it's important for us to have conversations, even though it might be very different to your own experiences currently. So I know everybody is feeling the pinch of increased cost of living, but where clients have got limited resources because the benefits haven't been increased, then the pressures are going to be that much more really than if you're working with a client who is able to put up their wages or put up their rates, or go out there and earn more money just by picking up some more clients, for example. So just having an awareness of the social factors that are around right now can be really useful. And similarly, when I've worked with clients who are in social housing, it's very difficult to imagine, if you aren't in that context yourself, about just what an impact it has upon you if you are living in close proximity to a crack den, for example, which is something that one of my clients had experienced, and the impact that has on you of being able to smell crack all the time and feeling like it's in your home, and it's affecting your health. And so sometimes even just having a conversation about your home, what it's like, how you feel to be there when you're there. Does it feel like a place of sanctuary, or are there factors that make it very tricky? So they might not tell you about some of these factors just unless you ask, because there may be a great deal of shame or stigma. And similarly, I worked with someone else who's got we did work with them, don't work with them anymore, and their neighbours' dogs were incredibly noisy, and it was affecting all areas of their well-being, really. And it was incredibly difficult, but it wasn't something that I necessarily would have thought to ask about had we not been doing a bit of a rundown of what it's like to be them. Take me through your day from morning to night, and give me a flavour of some of the things that crop up for you in that day. So that can be a really useful exercise, getting to know your client and getting to know the unique struggles which they might not necessarily be thinking are contributing to their difficulties, but as we know, they really can. If it's impacting on our sleep, or it's impacting on our ability to nourish or provide for ourselves or our children, then that can be very difficult indeed. And neighbour conflict is a big deal, because it can really make people feel vulnerable in their homes. So these are important conversations to have. But yeah, I think being brave enough to ask questions, but also just saying, well, how is that for you? What's that like? Or being honest, I don't have any experience of growing up in a situation where, English wasn't my first language, for example. How has that been for you? And I was recently doing a session with someone who spoke 3 or 4 languages. And so I asked them, well, how is it when I ask you questions in English and that isn't your first language? Can you tell me what goes on for you at that time? And they were then able to answer, what that is like for them. And they said that under pressure, it does get a bit trickier, but generally speaking, they are able mostly to think about situations now in English. But under pressure, we will often revert back to our earliest coping strategies. It might be worth knowing that for many of our clients that we might be working with, their earliest coping strategies might not almost be, within the British. If you're listening to this in Britain, they might not be socially that common within our British culture. So it's worth thinking with our clients about what makes them unique and about their coping strategies and their way of thinking about the world and what things have been like growing up and how that might be different for them now. So many of my clients in the past have then been not with their family, not in the same country as their birth families, and that has its own unique challenges as well. Just be open and interested and compassionate and wise, and don't be afraid to ask how things are for your clients. Don't always assume that we really want to be getting a bespoke feel for your clients as being unique and valuable people, and not just being treated as a number. So that's my own personal take on it. But I hope you found this useful. Hanaine, I hope this was what you imagined it might be. But if it hasn't been, let me know and I can give it another go. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Please do take a moment to rate and review my podcast episodes on the Apple podcast app. Find me, the Aspiring Psychologist Podcast. Scroll right to the bottom, right underneath the trailer, and that's where you'll find the rate and review section. So thank you so much for listening. If you would like to sign up to the waiting list for the Aspiring Psychologist membership, you can do that by checking out the details in the show notes or on my link tree. Thanks for listening and hope you have a lovely day. Take care.
If you're looking to become a psychologist, then let this be your guide. With this podcast at your side, you'll be on your way to being qualified. It's the Aspiring Psychologist Podcast with Dr. Marianne, Trent.